We've got some very interesting news to take a look at here today involving a certain New York Rangers player who is supposed to be one of the star players on this team, and that is Mika Zibanejad. And a report coming out that it does seem like Mika Zibanejad is willing to waive his no movement clause, in a trade for the right destination. And I think that would be really phenomenal if a trade could happen for the Rangers, but is it all that likely? That's kind of the question that we're going to talk about in today's video. And I do think this is some pretty big news, as Zibanejad is obviously someone who is making a lot of money and has not played great. And he does have that full no movement clause all the way until the final season of his contract in 2029-2030. At that season's trade deadline, 7 days prior to it, he will have a 21-team no-trade list. So it doesn't really change a whole lot there, and that's even in the very last season there, so that's way in the future. So if he is willing to waive his no movement clause, which that's what's in the report here, we'll take a look at it in a second, that could be some pretty big news for the Rangers, but the issue is still trying to get an actual trade to happen, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. So starting off here, though, let's take a look at the actual kind of article here and kind of what was specifically said by, David Pagnotta and the Fourth Period, which is, the writers of this article, as they end up saying here, quote, citing a source close to the Rangers, Pagnotta reported on Monday that Zibanejad would be open to waiving his no movement clause for the right environment. It is unclear, however, if the Rangers and Zibanejad have discussed which teams he would accept a move to, but that conversation could come if Drury finds the right fit. And that's kind of the issue as well, is it's not only finding the right spot for Zibanejad and which team kind of he would be willing to go to, but it's also the fact that once you find that specific team, and let's say there's maybe half a dozen there, maybe 6, 7, 8 teams. Who knows exactly? I mean, we don't know exactly the amount of, team that he would actually be willing to go to, but I can't imagine it'd be much more than, 6, 7, 8 kind of thing. So let's assume it's about that many. So now you have those teams. Now, which teams actually have the cap space available to go out there and make a trade and actually seems realistic? That could cut the list down even more, because there are certain teams out there that maybe he'd be willing to go to that probably just wouldn't be, capable or even kind of really want to trade for Zibanejad. And then if you find that maybe one or two teams, a couple teams that are on his list there that he'd be willing to go to, that, are obviously a possible kind of candidate there that realistically can trade for him with his contract and all that kind of stuff there, what do they want alongside him? Do we have to give an asset alongside Zibanejad? Do we have to give like a, first round pick for them to kind of take on the contract and then we don't have to retain any money? Or do we have to retain, like 20%, which personally I would not want to see happen, because he does have a still pretty long contract there, right? It runs until the summer of 2030. So you don't want to really have to retain any money on the contract, but it is a terrible one, if we're being honest here. And that's kind of the problem here as well, is it's not just for 1, 2, 3 more seasons. It's until 2030. That is a long time away now. So, what do you have to do to get rid of that contract? I think the Rangers really have to look at what needs to be done. And if you can get off this contract, I think it needs to be done. You really have to pull the trigger on it, but how much is it going to cost? You have to give up some assets alongside Zibanejad to get off that contract. Is there a team willing to take him on for pretty much nothing? Because I was kind of shocked there. I figured we had to give up assets alongside Jacob Trouba. Obviously, we ended up getting that 4th round pick in return for him, which I thought was a really great deal. But at the end of the day there, Jacob Trouba's contract is a lot shorter. He's also a defenseman who's that big, tough, physical guy, can be a decent leader possibly for a young team like the Anaheim Ducks there. So it definitely is a little different there. It's only, this season and next for Trouba there. Obviously, Zibanejad's a lot longer, and he is a different type of player. So that's kind of the issue there. I'm not quite sure how willing many teams are to take on that full contract without getting multiple assets, or at least a really good one, in return alongside Zibanejad. That's kind of the question that, the Rangers will have to figure out. What are teams willing to kind of do in a trade for Zibanejad? Do we have to give something up? Can we get something back in return, which I can't imagine? Or are teams really just in general even willing to go out there and get Zibanejad because of his contract, the way he's been playing, and all that kind of stuff there, maybe him not being the strongest mentally? I do think it could be what's best for the New York Rangers for sure, but also Mika Zibanejad himself as well. He does seem like a bit of a player who, can get a little in his head sometimes possibly and have some of those mental battles. So maybe getting out of the big New York City kind of area and stuff like that, maybe that could be good for him. But obviously a trade has to be, found there. First off, you have to find that team that he's willing to go to and then see if they're willing to take him on, which with that contract, there definitely is the question mark on truly how many teams out there around the NHL are actually willing to obviously take on that deal. Because like I said, with how many years are left on this contract, it running until the summer of 2030, retaining any money at all, even a couple mil, is really not the most ideal thing in the world. So it'll be an interesting kind of situation there for Drury if Zibanejad truly is willing to waive his no movement clause. What kind of a trade can he start trying to figure out and trying to get kind of done there? That is kind of a really interesting to see. Hopefully, possibly get done at some point, whether it is, more than likely I would guess this upcoming offseason. I can't imagine a deal would get done mid-season for Zibanejad if something were to happen, although I still really don't think it's going to happen. I will lean definitely towards it not happening than a deal actually happening, but I'm all for it if he does end up getting traded away. Although I do like Zibanejad as a player, obviously the way he's playing right now, I don't love, but in the past, he has been a really good player for us. Obviously not for the last couple seasons here, but he was really good at moments and definitely was a very fun player to watch as well. And we have another quote here to take a look at from their article, and they end up saying here, Friedman also suggested on Monday that Zibanejad could be up for grabs and he could be the next big shoe to drop in Manhattan, but noted the team is wide open for business. Quote, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's not Zibanejad, maybe they start looking somewhere else, Friedman said. But I definitely do think that, if Zibanejad is truly willing to waive his no-move clause and there is a trade out there that could possibly happen, you gotta try and make everything just kind of work to make that deal go through there, whatever you have to do. And obviously, like I said, the retaining salary is not the ideal situation, but you just have to figure out a way to get off this contract, because if things keep going the way they are, and there really is no reason to think that Zibanejad's game is going to completely turn around here, in the coming weeks or in the coming season or two either, really. And that's kind of the problem is he's here till 2030 that summer. He's here for a long time. This team is not going to be able to kind of just wait out this contract here. And although the cap does go up a lot, having $8.5 million of your cap pretty much every season be a guy like Zibanejad who right now only has 21 points in 36 games played. And when you consider, the point totals there and obviously them not being too good at all for someone making $8.5 million, and you also consider him having a dash 22 for plus minus there, minus 22. And he's also, if you just watch him play, he has been quite terrible defensively at moments. He has been a liability. He has been a big one at moments as well. He's been a direct cause of multiple goals this season, kind of just on his poor mistakes and turnovers and just bad plays and just poor decision making. I mean, I'm not trying to hate on Zibanejad here. I do like him as a player. I think he seems like a good guy and all of that. And I've been a big fan of his for a long time. I remember when I was a lot younger and this trade went down there with him coming over from Ottawa there and that Derek Brassard deal. I was so happy with that trade there. I thought it was such a steal. I've been a big fan of Zibanejad for a long time. And, this is a guy who have his jersey and all that, but he just has been playing terrible this season. I'm just not going to sugarcoat it here. He has been terrible. He has been a liability defensively, and it really is disappointing to say, but he has taken a massive step back from even last season where, last season he didn't play great for the Rangers, but at least the points were there for the most part in the regular season there. And, the playoffs, yes, he was not great, but so were some other guys. But I just think that there has been a pretty big drop off from even last season there where he already started to kind of slowly decline a bit. But this season we have seen a pretty huge drop off in his game, and that is really bad to say when you consider his contract runs until 2030, and he is 31, turning 32 years old in April. So this is a guy who's not going to get any younger. He's getting up there in age for sure. He's starting to get towards his mid-30s there. And, with his 6'2" size there, you kind of hope that his game can translate into his later 30s pretty well. But we're already seeing a pretty big drop-off here. So it's a little worrying, this contract for sure. And I know a lot of Rangers fans definitely want to see him waived or bought out or traded. But at the end of the day, I really don't see a trade happening just because of how this contract is with his age and with how fast his drop off has been in his game. I think it definitely is one of the kind of more risky contracts in the entire NHL. So personally, I don't see why a team would go out here and trade for his contract unless you are getting some really good assets alongside him or we're retaining a decent amount of money, which both those things are not an ideal situation for the Rangers. But at the end of the day, sometimes you have to do those kind of tough things there and add some assets alongside players to get rid of their contracts to make this team better. But still, just finding that team is definitely not going to be an easy thing to do. And hopefully, we can see a trade happen where the Rangers don't have to give up a bunch of assets alongside Zibanejad or like a first-round pick or something like that. But I'm not quite sure a deal is going to happen either way, in my opinion. But also, definitely comment down below your opinion and your thoughts on this whole situation here. Do you think Zibanejad should be traded away? I'm sure you probably agree with that at least. But, do you think it's actually realistic to see a trade happen now that it does seem like Zibanejad will be willing to waive his no-move clause, which I figured for a while he would not. But now with all the kind of maybe mental stuff going on with him probably just wanting to leave and kind of get a fresh start here. Maybe he does kind of want to just have a fresh start, go to a new place there, get out of the big New York kind of hockey, area there. And that also is probably an idea of which teams he might want to go to. Maybe it is some lower market teams there where maybe he kind of wants to go more towards a kind of playoff caliber team, which makes things maybe a little trickier possibly. Or maybe he just wants to go towards a rebuilding team, a retooling team in a lower tier market there to just kind of fly under the radar. Maybe he wants to do that as well. It's definitely a possibility. But either way, I would like to see a trade happen for Zibanejad and for the team. I think it's best for both sides. But anyways, definitely hit that subscribe button and hit that like button as well for daily New York Rangers content. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Let's go Rangers.